Stella. I'm a senior manager in the tax advisory department, and together with my colleague Michael, director in the legal services, we will tell you why Cyprus. Hello? Huh. So we will tell you why Cyprus can be an ideal intellectual property location. Over the last decades, Cyprus has established itself as a reputable financial and business center. Cyprus is a full member of the European Union since 2004, and this is giving Cyprus companies full access to the single market and all the other benefits this would entail. Now, this, together with its strategic geographic location in the crossroad of 3 continents, and of course the investor-friendly regulatory and tax system, is the reason why so many multinationals choose Cyprus to set up their operations. But let's look at intellectual property specifically. Now, what makes an ideal intellectual property location? So, to have intellectual property, you need research and development. And in order to have research and development, you need 2 key things: the people to do the research and development, and the infrastructure. And let's see now how Cyprus can fit this profile. Starting with people. Cyprus has highly educated workforce, and in fact, it has a very high percentage, one of the highest percentages in the European Union of university graduates. But even if the people that develop the intellectual property are not located in Cyprus, there are so many reasons why these people can move in Cyprus. Other than the tax incentives that are given for expatriates to come and live here in Cyprus, the pleasant climate, the low crime rate, the high quality educational and healthcare system, together with the high standard of living, are very good reasons why people that do research and development can move in Cyprus, not just them, but their families as well. And now let's see about the infrastructure. Cyprus has very well developed IT and telecommunications infrastructure and many research centers in universities, hospitals, and colleges. There is a very, very high focus on startups and small and medium enterprises. And this is the reason there are so many business incubators and even a research and promotion foundation which help people from the minute they will have an idea and guide them through developing their own intellectual property. Cyprus is ranked 3rd in the European Union in the innovation and entrepreneurship dimension. And Nicosia is currently developing into a research, development, and innovation center. Now, how is it to set up a company Cyprus and bring intellectual property in that Cyprus company and protect your intellectual property? My colleague Michael will elaborate further.
Thank you, Stella. Okay, thank you, Stella. So, hi from me as well. I am Michael Tsikouris, and I am director at the legal practice of PwC in Cyprus. Continuing where Stella has left it, the advantages of Cyprus as being chosen as an international business center and as a suitable place to set up and structure an IP business or any other business. So we say that Cyprus, in addition to all other advantages that it has also a legal framework, a legal system which is friendly to business. It is friendly to business because of many reasons. For example, most of the laws in Cyprus are found in the English language. It is predominantly a system which is based on the English legal system. Common law system of equity and English statutes are followed in Cyprus. The judicial authorities, the decisions of the UK courts have a persuasive authority in Cyprus courts, and these always give certainty to businessmen and women when they are transacting with other parties. Cyprus legislation is also fully compliant with the EU legislation, Cyprus being a full member state of the EU from 2004, or EU regulations, directives are applicable to Cyprus. Also, the European Convention on Human Rights is also applicable in Cyprus, and our constitution, which is a written one, again is construed in line with EU and ECHR law. The decisions of Cyprus courts are fully recognized by foreign courts and vice versa. The relevant EU regulation and multilateral treaties are applicable to Cyprus. As regards contracts, which is again something very much important for business transactions, a Cyprus company has freedom to contract under any governing law or under any language. Again, this is something which adds flexibility on business transactions. Validity of contracts. Again, being a common law country, the validity of contracts is not based on formalities or legalizations, payments of stamp duties, registrations. Of course, there are certain exceptions, but the general rule is that it is very easy to contract in Cyprus, and no notary, for example, is required in order for a contract to be valid. In addition to the above, as Stella said, it is very easy to set up and operate in Cyprus. You can incorporate and set up a company within a few working days, less than a week. It is also very flexible to set up joint ventures in Cyprus. The shareholders have a right to have different rights as to profit sharing, voting, decision making, participation, etc. Whereas the business secrets can remain confidential through the use of shareholders' agreements. Directors and shareholders can participate in meetings by electronic means, so they don't need to be in Cyprus if they have to be abroad. It is possible and easy to redomicile a Cyprus company out of Cyprus, and vice versa, a foreign company to Cyprus. And it is also very, very easy and quick to merge a Cyprus company with any other company throughout the EU. So all these reasons make Cyprus' legal system and legal framework friendly to business. In addition to that, there are no minimum capital requirements to Cyprus businesses, Cyprus companies. It is straightforward and easy to return capital to shareholders or to distribute dividends. There are very flexible rules governing this matter as well. And in case of dissolution, again, Cyprus law allows for a straightforward and quick manner of dissolving a company. There are certain different manners of doing it depending on the circumstances of each case. As regards IP, again, Cyprus has a complete legal framework which will allow full protection and at the same time flexibility for setting up and operating through Cyprus. Cyprus may be the designated country through which one can achieve both local and international protection of its intellectual property. Cyprus is being a signatory to all relevant international treaties, such as European international conventions, including the convention establishing the World Intellectual Property Organization, the so-called WIPO, the Madrid Agreement concerning the international registration on marks, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the Berne Convention for the protection of literary and artistic works, and the Paris Convention for the protection of international industrial property. Again, Cyprus law offers full protection to IPs. The most relevant legislations are the trademarks law, the patents law, copyrights law, and protection of industrial designs. With these, the full scope of IPs are protected, including copyrights, which may take any of the following forms: literary work, dramatic work, musical work, scientific work, artistic work, sound recordings, films, broadcasts, published editions, databases, publications, and software programs, patents, and also trademarks and designs and models which are used or applied for products. So again, Cyprus has a full scope of legislation which both locally and internationally protects IPs. What needs to be said is that Cyprus companies can either acquire IPs that have been already established and protected abroad, or Cyprus companies can protect themselves IPs which need protection, such as trademarks or patents, and this can be done through the Registrar of Companies in Cyprus, a specialized department of the Registrar of Companies, and through that one can protect the IP either only to Cyprus or through the EU, the relevant EU office, or through the WIPO to other countries around the world. So with that, I pass you back to Stella to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, well, as you probably know, one of the main reasons so many multinationals use Cyprus to set up their business is the Cyprus tax system. With one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the European Union, 12.5%. It's very investor-friendly tax system that provides for many exemptions and many deductions and many allowances that could reduce the effective tax rate of Cyprus companies much lower than this 12.5%. Dividends are not taxed in Cyprus, profits from disposals of shares are not taxed in Cyprus, foreign branch profits are exempt from taxation. All these reduce the taxable profits in Cyprus. So when you apply the 12.5% corporate tax rate on the reduced profits, you can achieve a much lower effective tax rate. But one of these deductions, one of these incentives in the Cyprus tax legislation is the new Cyprus IP box, which has been recently introduced and is effective as from July this year. Is fully compliant with all the guidelines and rules and directives, both in the European Union and internationally. And in just one sentence, what it can achieve that intellectual property companies in Cyprus are taxed in a maximum effective tax rate of 2.5%. So it can be 2.5 or even lower. Now, from the sound of it, if if you think about it, 2.5 is very low. But looking only the local dimension, someone could say, okay, why not to put the software I've created into a company in a tax haven and pay 0 tax instead of putting it in Cyprus and pay 2.5%. Because the international tax system does not work like that. So you set up a company, you put your intellectual property, and you start earning money. You start charging royalties for giving the right to use this intellectual property to other companies. And just to give you, for example, let's say you set up a company in a tax haven, and you want to charge a UK company royalties. The way the international tax system works, the UK, when the UK company will be paying your company the royalties, will be withholding tax. If it's a tax haven, or if it's a country that the UK does not have a double tax treaty, this withholding tax can be 20%. But through using a Cyprus company can have full access to EU directives and the broad double tax treaty network of Cyprus, which could eliminate this 20% tax in the UK. So if you put the intellectual property in a Cyprus company compared to a tax haven, you will end up paying a maximum tax of 2.5% in Cyprus and no tax in the UK. So what qualifies for this new intellectual property in Cyprus? Qualifying IPs are considered patents, copyrighted software, and certain other patent-like legally protected intellectual property. Marketing IPs like trademarks that used to qualify under the previous regime no longer do because of all these international and EU regulations. So what can be qualifying income? Royalties, obviously. Profits from disposal of such IP, if these profits are of trading nature. So if it's a one-off transaction of a capital nature is exempt, no taxation at all. And embedded income. What is embedded income? Think when you go to the pharmacy and buy pills, you pay a price to buy these pills. Now, part of this price relates to the raw materials that are required to make the pill. Part of it relates to the cost of the whole package. Part of it relates to the patent, this secret formula that was used in order to make this pill work. Okay, this is embedded royalties, and this portion of the income also qualifies for the Cyprus IP box. Okay, so the new Cyprus IP box is applicable on legally and or economically owned qualifying intellectual property, which is basically either developed by the Cyprus company in Cyprus, outsourced to a third party, developed by the Cyprus company through a foreign branch, or acquired, but for which further development was required in Cyprus. And there is a formula and a method that you can calculate the qualifying profits and the portion of it. I'm not going to get into the detail. What is important is that the higher the research and development that is taken by the Cyprus company itself under these four methods, the higher the portion of the profits that qualifies for this IP box, and the lower the effective tax rate in Cyprus. But this new Cyprus IP box is only one of the provisions of the legislations which could reduce the tax rate. There are many more. There are many more that, what does that mean is that you can still achieve a tax rate of 2.5%, even if your profits do not qualify for the IP box. There are ways, and there are ways to do that. Sorry for that. Finally, I've told you earlier about the incentives that are provided in the tax legislation so that would assist people take a decision and relocate in Cyprus in order to ensure that the research and development happens in Cyprus. There is a 50% exemption on the salaries, on the remunerations of expatriates that locate in Cyprus if their salary exceeds 100,000 euros, and is applicable for 10 years. And what that means is that such employment income can be taxed maximum at 17.5%. There are also many other exemptions: no tax on dividends, no tax on interest, no tax on disposals of shares and other qualifying titles, which again can assist in reducing the effective tax rate, not just for the companies that we said earlier, but also for the individuals. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. We are now ready to move to questions. George here will pass on the mic. Do we have any questions? Start with? Yeah? George, and then gentleman here.
Hi, my name is George. I'd like to ask you a bit more from this is very interesting, by the way, and I think it's very useful, and from the startup angle, okay, especially a startup that wants to fundraise. From our limited experience, what we have seen abroad is that many of the investors, many of the VCs are insisting that the IP is located and in the country where the VCs are. For example, San Francisco, when you try to raise money there, many of the Silicon Valley-based investors insist that the IP should be generated there. Similar case is for London. When you try to raise money there, there is a lot of pressure, let's say, to have the IP generated in that country where you do the fundraise. At the same time, all these benefits with the new IP box in Cyprus makes it a very, very attractive proposition. Obviously, at an exit event as well, this is very, very attractive for startups. So my question to you guys is that, let's say someone who doesn't have experience and is not very familiar with all this, but wants to follow the startup VC-funded route. What's the best structure that you could advise so that they can have a proper international setup that could be both beneficial from a fundraising, but also from a tax perspective?
There is not one answer to your question, I'm sure you know. But as we try to present here, Cyprus should be at least, I would say, suitable place for the structuring of such a venture. And this is because it has all the benefits that the legal framework of Cyprus provides, but also because of what Stella has advised. As regards now whether the specific tax advantages would apply on a particular scenario, I will let Stella to say more, but I would say generally that of course, each case has to be considered on its own merits. Generally speaking, the IP box, as you have seen, provides huge advantages.
Basically, as I've mentioned earlier, even if you develop your intellectual property via a foreign branch, at least from a Cyprus perspective alone, this could work. Okay, this could work, but it has to work from the other country as well. So depending on the country and depending on the tax rules of that said country, this can work. The thing is that, there are many cases where people are trying to push people, set up somewhere, do something somewhere. Is it really an obligation? Is it really something which is necessary to be done that way? If yes, so then I guess we have to see it on a case-by-case basis. Now, if no, what I need you guys to know is that Cyprus is here, it can work. It depends obviously on the facts, the circumstances, the countries, their tax systems, and so on, but Cyprus can work.
Sure, Michalis, I'm a colleague of Michalis and Stella. What is important here is to know that Cyprus can work, that you have to go prepared before you go to the VCs of considering the country you're going and what you expect to require, to go prepared, and if possible, present the case of Cyprus, why Cyprus can work. Because a lot of pushing comes often from the fact that they are not aware of Cyprus and why it works. So if you go prepared with having in mind the structure that might work in their case, then you have more chances of safeguarding that Cyprus is used. Because we've seen cases that people set up, for example, in the Netherlands, okay? In the Netherlands, it's very, very difficult to get out. So that makes it quite difficult if something goes wrong. So a lot of pushing comes from lack of awareness. So if you go prepared, it's more likely to convince them to use Cyprus. Just that.
One follow-up, because I think this is very important discussion, and I think, again, guys, maybe I can give you a bit background. So basically, we had a startup, we had an M&A event recently, and for us, the tax was something that we didn't care at all. But then, at some point, the important point is then when you realize how much important it is, how much case-by-case it is, how costly it is, and how big mistakes you have done because you have not taken expert advice earlier on. So I think, first of all, I think it's very useful that you guys as PwC, you are here. I think this is very valuable, but I think it's a bit underappreciated because not many people are aware of all the difficulties that will come later on. So my question was for us, what would be useful? We are engineers, okay? So we knew nothing about law, we knew nothing about tax, about accounting, so we made all the mistakes possible with that. So we had to pay later on that. But what would be useful, again, going back, if we could have, from the Cyprus perspective, some typical scenarios. Let's say you are doing a tech startup that is going to have... Okay, sorry. I was saying just for what would be a useful advice for us, maybe a typical scenario, tech startup doing fundraising in London, doing fundraising in US, basically, what would be a recommendation? I think that would be useful for people that don't have to go into the details to get some recommendation. But thanks again.
I've mentioned it always depends. So it depends on every country separately. It's not black or white. It's not this country, this country, this country, and this country work. This country and this country does not work. This country maybe. It always depends. And in order to, we can take it less privately if you want to give me the countries, and we can discuss it privately if you want. I can also send you the presentation so that you are more aware. Thank you.
So I'm gonna need a clarification. You said that the 2.5% is much better than a tax haven. I didn't really get that part as to why. Did you say that taken as a fact that the other country is not a part of the EU?
Well, Um, there are no tax havens in the European Union.
Okay.
The regulations and the directives and the things that we have to comply ensure that you cannot have a tax haven and be a member of the European Union. Now, the reason I'm saying it works is because, you know, all the countries in which you will license out your intellectual property have their own tax system. And in these tax systems, they have the right, when they will be making a payment to your company, they have the right to withhold tax because the income is actually sourced in their country. So I've set the example with the UK because it was the first thing that came to my mind. So according to the UK's legislation, if a UK company makes a payment abroad, there is a payment of royalties abroad, there is a 20% withholding tax. So if the UK company will be paying the company that is licensing the intellectual property, they will be paying 100, they will keep 20, so the company will only have profits of 80 net in its pockets. Now, the European Union, you know, this whole single market thing, have certain rules, and if you meet certain criteria, then you can avoid withholding taxes on any transactions within the European Union. So if you have EU company paying royalties or interest or dividend to another EU company, there is no withholding tax if you meet these criteria. So this is the example I've set with the UK and Cyprus. So if you have the UK paying royalties to Cyprus instead of tax haven jurisdiction where it would be 20%, then there would be no withholding tax in the UK, so you would avoid paying this 20% tax. And the only tax leakage, if you want to call it, you will need to pay is this 2.5% in Cyprus. Now, maybe it's not a UK company you want to license out. Maybe it's a third country, okay? Cyprus has a number of double tax treaties with many countries, which could reduce the withholding tax rates that these countries are imposing as per their local legislation, lower or even eliminate them. So again, instead of withholding 20%, there could be a withholding of 10%. Or there could be, again, zero, because they have this special agreement between the two countries that eliminate withholding taxes. Now, even if it's not a double tax treaty partner of Cyprus, there is no agreement between Cyprus and the country you want to license out your intellectual property. And there will be 20% tax payable there. If you have it in Cyprus, you can claim this tax as a credit and therefore not pay anything in Cyprus. Again, so it's exactly the same. Thank you.